You're listening to the Huddle Up Podcast with Chad Jensen and Zack Kelberman. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com and sound off. And now it's time to drop some knowledge.
Okay, and we are live. I'm just going to give it a second to breathe. Make sure the stream is on pace. I think we're good. Welcome in, everybody, to the Huddle Up Podcast live, presented as always by Mile High Huddle, powered by Overtime Media. I'm your host, Chad Jensen. And with me, as always, fresh off a nice weekend off, my partner in crime, you know him, you love him, sporting the swaggiest of gear, Zack Kelberman. Zack, how was your weekend, bro?
It was fairly quiet, Chad. Just, caught up on some work, went to the gym. But other than that, same old, same old. But how about you? How was your weekend? Yeah.
Basketball game for the kid, caught up around some yard work that needed doing because we've got some nice warm weather here in the Rockies. Amidst all the snow and whatnot, it finally warmed up for a weekend, so I took advantage of that. Got some vitamin D, need that sun.
That's right. It was super cold here too, so nothing compared to you in Utah, but it was a definite cold. It was like the 20s here, and everyone was freaking out. So it's nice to warm up.
Guys, we have so much we want to get to today, and we want to welcome in everybody who's been hanging out in the room. Chris, Duke, Robert, King Stacy, Mehmet, keep going, Black Knight, what's up?
What's up, guys? Good to see you.
And goodness gracious, we've got a new record on Super Chat. We'll grab that right now. Let me go down here, see if I can find it in the comment stream. There we are, Steve Baumgartner, a true superstar on Super Chat. Steven, that means the world to us,
man.
Dude.
Thank you so much. That's crazy.
Keep this party going, dude. Thank you so much, my brother. And today, what we're going to do, before I grab what Steven's saying here, today we're making it kind of part of the programming between now and when free agency opens. Sunday night's the live pod is going to basically look back on the previous week, all the buzz from the rumor mill. And I'm mirroring that on the written site at milehighhuddle.com with a written article. So Zack and I are going to go through that today. You guys, of course, will get your questions, your comments, what's on your mind. We'll get to all that here in just a second. But first, Steven saying a secondary with Byron Jones, Bryce Callahan, Prince Amukamara, Justin Simmons, Kareem Jackson, and then Littleton at linebacker and A.J. Johnson at linebacker would be amazing. I don't disagree. And you know what's crazy, Zack? The closer we're getting to free agency, that's a plausible lineup because, you could probably get – we'll talk more about this here in just a minute. You could probably get Prince Amukamara for, cornerback 2 or 3 money, especially considering his age. And we already know the Broncos are, according to Cecil Lammey, going to go after Byron Jones as a top priority. So this could be – I don't know about Littleton. We'll see how it shakes out. Not that I'm not – a fan of Littleton. He's a great player, good coverage linebacker. He'd fit great next to AJ, but that's a plausible lineup there.
I have 3 words for that. Incomplete. I mean, that secondary would be no-fly zone 2.0. The entire defense would be on point. It would be hard to throw against them, and they're already good stopping the run. I would love if that panned out, Chad, and it's certainly plausible. It's not unrealistic. It's not like we're playing Madden here by projecting these players around. Littleton might be on the tail end of the luxury spectrum there, but it's certainly within reason they're going to bring in Byron Jones, certainly within reason they can bring in Prince Amukamara. They can rebuild the secondary with talented players, some that Vic Fangio already knows well. So I'm excited to see what they're going to do this offseason.
Me too. And we're going to go through this article, guys. First, just a couple of really quick matters of business. Make sure you're following the show on Twitter at HuddleUpPod. It is simply the best way for you to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening with the show in real time. And I usually wait until the end of the show, but you can see here where to find Zack and myself on Twitter at Kelberman NFL, at Chad and Jensen. And and if you are a listener of the pod, make sure you let us know, and we'll follow back and stay engaged with you guys. We appreciate you. And then don't forget to head on over to huddleuppod.com and get in on some of that merch, man. The hat Zack's wearing, the shirts we're wearing, we got the hoodies, we've got stuff for men, stuff for women, everything you need, and we're adding more and more to it as we go on. I'm going to drop the link here in the comment stream. Check that out when you guys get some time. It's a great organic way to not only support the show, support Mile High Huddle, but also to rep some really good-looking gear. And so take care of that.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, Zack. Let me get this comment stream back up. Man, just floored, Steve, by the way. I'm still just stunned. We appreciate you so much, bro.
Seriously.
All right, Zach, let's talk for a sec. And I want to touch on this what's basically everything we learned about the Broncos free agency plans, what they've been connected to, what they've been tied to over this past week. And the first thing is, and a lot of these we've already touched on in one form or another when they came out as live news. The first being, Zach, the fact that the Denver Broncos, according to Mike Klis, and of course this is no shocker to you and I, we've been saying this since the offseason began, the Broncos are going to prioritize their free agent dollars to fill needs primarily on the defensive side of the ball. And of course, utilize the draft to build the offense. And the three things that you take away from that, though, from Mike Klis, Zach, are the fact that it's D-line, it's cornerback, and then maybe off-ball linebacker.
Yeah, I mean, that's the order, I think, and that's all plausible positions they can rebuild on the free agent market. They have the money to do that, and what other positions can you think of? I mean, that's the biggest three targets, in my opinion, what we've been saying.
I mean, free agency speaking, if we were to look at the offense, we'll talk more about some of the other players the Broncos have been tied to in the rumor mill here in just a second, outside free agents. But I can see them spending on a backup quarterback in free agency, depending on the player. And I could see them maybe signing like a right guard, maybe a center. More inclined to, if they do end up going and signing an offensive lineman in free agency, it probably being a guard as opposed to center. But other than that, I think those free agent dollars, they're going to be spent on that defensive side of the ball to basically fill some of these holes, which at this point, I mean, the defensive line alone, I mean, it is a gaping hole of inexperience. Not to say that Draymond Jones hasn't shown something as a rookie last year. He was defensive player, not defensive rookie, defensive player of the week for week 16. Had a few sacks. DeMarcus Walker, when he's been on the field, he's made an impact as a pass rusher. But neither one are fully rounded, full-time starter capable quite yet. So it still represents quite a hole there.
I can think of also maybe a backup veteran tight end as well they can sign on the free agent market. I mean, they have Noah Fant. They have a couple young guys there. If they want a veteran blocker, I can see them turning to that side of the offensive ball. But primarily that's going to be rebuilt through the draft with, offensive line, whether that's a guard, center, or tackle, wide receiver, running back. They're going to handle their business on the offense in the draft and use the free agent market to handle the defense.
The other thing here, and this is something that you and I are yet to discuss on the podcast, a lot of this stuff, guys, go read the article. It's at milehighhuddle.com. It's one of the lead stories, the pre-combine rumor mill roundup. One storyline, though, that came onto my radar anyway over the weekend was something that was published by Pro Football Network, utilizing their two insiders, one of whom we know well, in Benjamin Albright, the other one, Tony Pauline, to talk about what's going on with Shelby Harris, what they're hearing about Derek Wolfe. And to make a long story short, the Broncos expect Shelby Harris to be gone. He's as good as gone. Someone's going to pay him, and it's going to be a lot more than they're going to be willing to pay him. So they're basically already kissing him goodbye. Whereas with Derek Wolfe, the expectation at Dove Valley, Zach, they expect him back. They do expect to be able to get Wolfe re-signed.
And that's always been the more plausible outcome here. He will take a little less money. He wants to be a Bronco. I think he would give the Broncos more of a discount than Shelby Harris would. Harris, admittedly, is all about his money here. I could see a short-term, maybe incentive-laden contract for Derek Wolfe, 2 years, not high in guarantees, allow him maybe finish his career in Denver. I can definitely see it happening, but it shouldn't preclude Denver either from supplementing that position, whether in the draft, whether a mid-tier free agent. They have to keep building that defensive line because they're one injury away from having nothing again.
Guys, we're going to get to your questions. We're going to get to, the super chat's stacking up. We're going to get to that, guys. I promise you. Just give us a few more minutes here. We're going to touch on a couple more of these. The other thing here, Zach, is what we learned on Friday about Will Parks. Now, Will Parks has kind of been the forgotten guy, right, in the free agency rumor mill as it relates to the Broncos' own free agents. And we learned from NFL Network's James Palmer, though, that he is going to have a market for his services out there when free agency rolls around. He called it it's kind of weird. Here's what he said, quote, "He is really one of the more versatile guys, along with Chris Harris, on this defense." This is James Palmer. "I have talked to people around the league. There is a market for Will Parks. He played slot corner for them. He's a tough guy that plays everywhere. They consider him a very valuable piece of their defense. He's a guy that has a sleepy market out there for teams that are interested in him, close quote. I'll leave it at that. So he's saying there's a market, but it's kind of a sleepy market. Let me tell you how I interpret that. I interpret that to mean, Zach, that Will Parks will find some suitors out there, and they're probably going to be teams who have defensive coaches on hire, on staff, who have worked with Parks in the past, whether it be like Vance Joseph with the Arizona Cardinals or another coach around the league, someone that's got experience working directly with Parks as a pro.
I could see Joe Woods come calling for Will Parks. He's the new coordinator of the Cleveland Browns, and they need defensive help, and he can be a starter there. He has starter caliber potential, just not with the Broncos. They have their two guys for the future, but he's going to have a market, and I think he will price himself out of the Broncos' range. The only way he comes back to me, Chad, is if he really meets a cold market and he has no other suitor. Maybe the Broncos can resign him, but Broncos fans should be bracing for the inevitability of losing Will Parks to a starting role elsewhere.
Yeah, they're going to let him test the market, and depending on whether, how right James Palmer is, if they end up, if Parks finds some big time suitors out there and, it gets upwards in the many millions of dollars per year to sign Parks, the Broncos are going to wish him, good luck and catch you later. Yeah. If it's something where they can still get him signed somewhere close to, they want to recognize him for his contributions, but somewhere close to veteran minimum, somewhere between $1 to $3 or $4 million a year, somewhere in that range, I think then they'd be willing to bring him back. But someone's probably going to be willing to pay him more than what the Broncos will. So he's as good as gone. All right, the other thing that we haven't touched on, and again, guys, go read this article yourselves for all of each and every storyline. I just don't want to recapitulate some of these that Zach and I have already talked to you guys about. The other one we haven't talked about, three more here actually, we haven't talked about. The Broncos being predicted by Pro Football Focus to land Michael Pierce. Actually, we did talk about that, right? Yeah. As the number 42 free agent, they connected him to Denver.
We discussed it briefly. I don't know about that article in specific, but we discussed Michael Pierce on the show.
I know we were asked about it by one of the listeners, but he makes some sense if you can get him on the cheap. He kind of had a down year and a contract year, which is concerning because, of course, most players in a contract year, that's when they really show out. He took a step back, which you got to ask and wonder why, especially in a year when that Ravens team was just playing inspired football on both sides of the ball. Right. But it's a situation to monitor. I think they predicted a 3-year deal worth $5 million per year, 3 years, $15 million. So keep an eye on that. Now, the other thing, we haven't talked about this. The Chicago Bears released 2 players who figure to be on the Broncos' radar. The cornerback, Prince Amukamara, and wide receiver, Taylor Gabriel. Zach, do you want to see either one of those, or would you want to see either one of those players in Denver?
I definitely would not mind Prince on a relatively short-term deal. He's not what he once was. I don't think he's a cornerback 1 for any team in the NFL, but he's definitely a cornerback 2, if worse, a cornerback 3 for Denver. He can be depth in the secondary. He knows Vic Fangio. He wouldn't break the bank like a Darius Slay would, maybe even a Byron Jones would. But the good thing about the Broncos' capital this offseason, Chad, they can sign a mid-tier starter like a Mukamara and then go out and get Byron Jones as well. And I'd rather do that than trade for Darius Slay.
All right. I agree with you on that. The last thing, two things. No, we talked about Teddy Bridgewater, which we lambasted that. We debunked that. So here's the last thing, and this was something that came out over the weekend. The Broncos being predicted as suitors for Amari Cooper. And this was done by one of our former colleagues over at CBS Sports, Patrick Walker. Bless his heart, great guy. He's a national writer. He's a Cowboys guy. He's very connected to what's happening in Dallas, not so connected to what's happening in Denver. Right. He predicted, of course, the Broncos being one of 3 or 4 other teams to be in on Cooper. But, Zach, when you drill a little bit deeper and you recognize the real situation on the ground in Denver, Amari Cooper, if the Cowboys do, in fact, let him hit the market, he's going to command, according to Spot Track, close to $20 million per year. Now, considering the Broncos already have a wide receiver 1, is there any realm of the plausible in which they're going to be willing to compete with outside teams to pay this guy $20 million?
Even if he wasn't getting paid $20 million, even if it was $15 million, $14 million, he's not what the Broncos need as a wide receiver too. He's an unbelievable route runner. He's really good at his craft, but he's not the speediest guy. He has injury concerns. He's going to command massive money. The Broncos need a pure speedster, a Tyreek Hill type next to Courtland Sutton. As good as Amari Cooper is, he's not that type of wide receiver. So I don't expect the Broncos to beat around that bush at all. If anyone from the Cowboys they're going to be after, it's Byron Jones. 0% interest, in my opinion, in Amari Cooper.
I agree. And I just put the article link, guys, when we get off the pod and you get some time, go read the article. But that's kind of the roundup heading into the combine. I've checked in with a few of my contacts around the league. that, on the eve of this momentous week that, where there's going to be some things coming out. We're going to get a chance to hear from Vic Fangio. We're going to get a chance to hear from John Elway. And so we might get a few other nuggets that come our way between now and the end of next week. So let's turn the page and jump to our questions here in the comment stream and our super chats that are really stacking up. Goodness gracious. All right, bear with me, guys. I got to get to the top of this stream before it gets beyond my grasp here. Stu, jumping in.
Stu.
Goodness gracious.
No words, man.
Wow. So generous, so outgoing, and steadfast in your support of the show and Mile High Huddle. We appreciate you, bro, and we love you. He says, thanks for all the great content, guys. Thank you for your support, Stu.
Stu, seriously. Yes. No words, man. Appreciate you.
Let's grab a question here from Yordi Lopez. What do you think the bottom line for Byron Jones money-wise is? Zach, I'm thinking 15, 16 million. Mm-hmm. Could end up being more, but what do you think?
I believe it's going to be, Pro Football Focus projected he's going to sign with the Las Vegas Raiders for $16 million per season. I think it was 50.5 guaranteed, both of which would be NFL records, and he'd be the highest paid corner in the NFL. The baseline for Byron Jones is going to be 14 mil, but I think he'll check it anywhere from 15 to 16. Might be too rich for the Broncos' blood, but that's the going rate for a shutdown cornerback who's young in his prime and can moonlight at safety as well.
Justin on Facebook wants to know, what's the realistic cost to get Slay, and why would we be kicking the tires on Cooper? We already addressed that second notion. It's not a realistic, plausible. I even checked with Benjamin Albright on this, and it's unrealistic that the Broncos are going to be willing to lay out that kind of cash for Amari Cooper. So let's tackle the first thing Justin's curious about here. Zach, what's the realistic cost to get Slay? Here's what I've heard, okay? It's going to take a minimum of a third-round pick, and it's probably going to end up taking 2 picks, Zach, a third and a fifth to land Darius Slay. And then you got to give him an extension. He's looking for around $15 million per year with his new team that he can sit back and relax and go, all right, I'm locked in long-term with this team. This team loves me. This team wants me. So if you get Slay, obviously that probably means you're out on Byron Jones. It will be interesting to see if that deal gets done with Slay and the Detroit Lions between now and when the legal tampering period kicks off March 16th.
It's going to take at least a third-round draft pick at the minimum, and he's going to probably want to see what Byron Jones gets on the free agent market. That'll set his price, but he definitely wants to be among the highest-paid cornerbacks, if not the highest-paid corner. So realistically, a third-round draft pick, probably a second the Lions would hold out for, and $15 million per year. And that's why I'm out on that. It's one or the other for me. When you could just pay Byron Jones the $15 million, get a younger player who's, I think, better for the Broncos scheme, that's the direction I go. But it's going to cost a lot to pry Slay from the Lions.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
We got a question here from Travis Bruley on YouTube. Are we keeping Joe Flacco? This is a question that we it's like whack-a-mole. We have to tamp it down at least once a week. The Broncos are not, barring some crazy loophole, some weird circumstance, the Broncos are going to end up parting ways with Flacco. What's happening right now is the posturing of the Broncos trying to avoid having to pay an injury settlement on Joe Flacco, which is why you heard whatever it was last week. I think it was beginning of last week, Zach, that the Broncos believe Joe Flacco is going to be healthy enough with that neck to play in 2020. They don't care. That doesn't make a difference to them in terms of altering their teams, what they're going to do to build their roster, who's going to start at quarterback. That's Drew Lock. It's not Joe Flacco. They're getting that out there for multiple reasons. One, to test the trade market, let people know, hey, we think it's going to be good. And also to start posturing for, hey, we're going to cut you, and we don't want to have to pay you anything more than we already have.
Yeah, this is all calculated right now. The Broncos know what they're doing by putting out these bits of information, and they're begging another team to trade for him, to take his salary off the Broncos' hands. I don't think it's going to happen. Denver will have to bite the bullet there, but he's not going to be on the roster in week 1. He will be gone way before that, and we can finally turn the page on what has just been a disastrous era in Broncos football.
It makes you yearn for the days of Case Keenum, right? Did Joe Flacco for the Denver Broncos. All right. Brian Greenfield, longtime listener, one of our Super Chat superstars.
Thank you, Brian.
With a $5 donation.
Appreciate you, man.
Bro. Do you think the Broncos could or should use Andrew Beck as a receiving threat out of the backfield, especially on third and short? The fullback position is not one that you're going to see utilized much in the passing game with Pat Shurmur. So Beck, he definitely has I think he showed last year as an undrafted rookie out of Texas, I think. Either way, as an undrafted rookie, the Broncos picked up off the scrap heap on the doorstep of the season. He proved that he can make a play with the ball in his hands, and he proved to be also scrappy as a blocker. And I think that that's probably, like, if I'm projecting ahead, just with the talent that's on the roster now, tight end 1, Noah Fent, tight end 2, Jeff Hireman. If they end up keeping him, there's a chance he could be cut. We'll see as a cap casualty. But, with the Broncos not being desperate for money this year, I think they're going to hold on to Hireman. And then tight end 3 is Andrew Beck. So there's a pecking order there, Brian. If there's an injury to either one of those top 2 guys, you'll see Beck on the field.
And as it relates to, short passes over the middle or anything like that, that's going to be a combination of Sutton. It's going to be a combination of Noah Fant and maybe even Janovich if he's on the field for the Broncos. Andrew Beck's not going to have a huge role. I think he'll make the team like Chad is saying. He's not going to have a huge role in this Broncos offense. If anyone's going to benefit at tight end, it's going to be Noah Fant.
All right, let's see what else we got here, guys, making it for a lively conversation as always. All right, Steven jumping in again on Super Chat. Thanks, Steven. Appreciate you, bro.
Thank you.
Are you guys going to the Combine this week? All right, so here's what happened, you guys. Here's what's going on. Zach and I were planning on meeting up at the Combine and doing that just like we did last year. But it came down to, did we want to do that or do we want to do the draft? Just because of circumstances going on with my family life. Nothing bad, no drama or anything, but just things that are on the schedule. I had to pick one or the other. It's my fault. It's not on Zach. It's me with the family and the wife and all that stuff. And so what we decided to do is we felt like, you know what, there would be more opportunity to make some hay for content at the draft and possibly even meet up with listeners, have a meetup podcast in Vegas if we prioritize doing the draft and doing Vegas instead of going to the Combine. And so that's what we decided to do. So Zach and I were hanging back. We're not going to the Combine. We have our contacts that are going to be there. We're going to be very key and in tune and in touch with what's happening at the Combine. But Zach, we're going to choose to hit up the draft at the end of April instead of the Combine this year, just to kind of shake things up.
Yeah, I think it's better interaction for our listeners out in Vegas, and I think we can do something for the pod like you mentioned, Chad. And also it being the new home of the Raiders, we can do a little scouting of the enemy there. So we plan on doing something fun for our podcast and our audience, and we have something planned for April for the draft.
Yeah, so, and as we get a little bit closer, here we are. I mean, the draft is now officially about 2 months out, right? We're at the end of February. It's going down end of April. As we get a little bit closer, we're going to start putting together a plan of attack. We're considering whether or not we want to organize now and try and get a room for a hangout, depending on how astronomical a cost it might be to rent a room at a casino or something like that. Because that's the only place you can, right? In Vegas, it's you organize at the casinos. So we're going to check into that. Worst case scenario, we'll have a meetup at some to be announced location. And any of our great listeners who are in Vegas at the time, if you make the trip for the draft, because the NFL does a lot of cool stuff for fans for the draft. It's becoming big business for the NFL. So there's a lot of fan draw to Vegas and for the draft. So if any of our listeners end up going, and those who are living in Vegas, we have a lot of listeners in Vegas too. We'll hope to see you guys there. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Let's look here. Bear with me, guys. Yordi, we talked about Amari Cooper. We've already crushed that one into the dust. Let's grab Terry Randall up in Canada, proving as always that Broncos country, it's not a geographic location. It is a state of being. Jumping in, $10 donation.
Thank you, Terry.
It says no wide receivers in free agency, draft or college free agents only. Michael Pierce for sure. Go heavy on offensive line in the draft. Mike Munchak will make lemonade. Who are you going to have eyes on at the Combine Football Priest? So again, Zach and I won't be there. Doesn't mean we're not going to be paying close attention to what's happening at the Combine. Eric Trickle has had a really cool series. If you guys, I'm sure a lot of you have been following it closely, a written form at milehighhuddle.com where he's listed from each position group the players, the prospects at each position that have the most questions to answer. But honestly, I'm going to be looking especially at the wide receivers, at the cornerbacks, defensive line, off-ball linebackers, and offensive guards and tackles.
I'm with you right there. To throw out one more position, I'm going to say special teamers, punter, kicker, because there's a good chance the Broncos are going to reload at those spots. But yeah, if I were to go to the combine this year, I was going to be heavy on the wide receivers. There's a good chance the Broncos aren't going to just draft one in the first round. They can come out of the first 100 picks with 2 new starting wide receivers. They're going to be heavy invested. And I agree, don't splurge on one. They don't need Amari Cooper. They don't need any of these guys on the open market. Wait until the draft and reload with young talent and let them blossom together with Drew Lock.
Sleek Tro on YouTube, he says, do you think we should get rid of Jake Butt? His health issues are a huge problem for the Broncos. They have absolutely been a huge problem for the Broncos. He has been completely unable to cash in on any of the draft investment the Broncos made into him. I don't think, though, at this point, they're in for a dime, in for a dollar. He's going into it the last year of his rookie deal, Zach. There's no reason to just cut bait unless you brought him in for a physical and there was some complication again with that knee, another flying the ointment of his recovery, whatever you want to call it, then, and you can see that it's going to have effects here in the very near future, then of course you just say, you know what, we got to call a spade here. We're going to wish you the best, cut you loose. But the way it's trending, Zach, is Jake Butt is going to participate in OTAs. He's going to be around to participate in training camp, barring any setbacks, and we'll let the chips fall, see how it shakes out.
Fingers crossed, I guess. It's good to have optimism about Jake Butt, but it's easier to have skepticism considering his injury history. And I'll continue to say anything the Broncos get out of Jake Butt, even if it's 1 reception for 1 yard, is a bonus this season. Noah Fant is their future at that spot, not Jake Butt, but I wish him well in his recovery, and I hope he can make some sort of impact and salvage his career.
Jonathan, we're just glad that you're with us, bro. Every viewer matters equally to us. We love you all. Our Super Chat superstars, they're in the position where they can chip in, and that's great. We appreciate it. We don't ask for it. So We just appreciate you participating in the conversation, listening, watching. We love you, and thanks for being here with us, my friend. JP on Super Chat jumps in. He says, "Hey guys, long-time watcher from SoCal, first time live. What do you guys think of going wide receiver, Chenault in the first, and a guy like a corner like Trayvon Diggs from Alabama in the second?" Again, guys, I'm not opposed to that. Don't get me wrong with what I'm about to say, but as you know, I'm a little bit more of a proponent for going non-wide receiver in the first round if you can. If one of the blue chippers are there at 15, just because it is such a deep class. But if the Broncos did get Laviska Shenault, the Colorado running back who plays wide receiver basically, at pick 15 and then was still able to get Trayvon Diggs, Diggs is solid. I don't think he's the best corner fit for Fangio's scheme, but he's still – very good player. That's a couple of 1 and 2 picks to start the draft that I think would be very favorable for the team.
Yeah, it would depend on how the board breaks out, but if there's one Diggs the Broncos are going to have this offseason, I'm in favor of being Trayvon Diggs, and I love the idea. It doesn't matter really who. You can fill in the prospects for these spots, but going receiver and corner in the first 2 rounds, I am all on board with that. Again, I like to see what players fall of the Broncos at 15 if they stick in that spot, but going corner or receiver then corner is definitely, I'm on board with that for sure.
Dylan says, longtime listener of the show, also one of our big supporters on Super Chat. He says, I'd like AJ Epinesa, the Iowa. I think he's viewed more as an edge, depending on who else is on the board. Fans see him listed at edge, but he could easily play defensive end. That was something that was discussed on if you guys haven't checked it out, it's on the podcast. Go check out Building the Broncos pod from yesterday. They had John Ledyard on to talk about the trenches, and I think they asked that very question to Ledyard about, hey, do you think Epinesa could play inside? Because, that's something that was bandied about, for example, with Bradley Chubb. Hey, he can stand up and rush from the edge, which is what fans have basically seen him do in Denver his first couple years. Or he can kick inside in certain packages and maybe rush as a 5-tech, a 3-tech even. They're thinking that Epinesa might be able to do that, but I still see him more, Dylan, for what it's worth, as an edge. And so if you're picking at 15, you already have Vaughn. You already have Chubb. Even if Epinesa is on the board, I'm thinking, depending on who else is there, but he wouldn't be one of the first guys for me, all due respect.
Yeah, plus you have like Malik Reed and Justin Hollins. You have the young developmental prospects that are along the edge. The Broncos are fine there. I mean, Chubb's going to come back to full form. They don't need an edge player at that spot. I mean, that would be, to me, a real last resort. Everything would have to break against the Broncos to go that route. So I don't see an edge player in that spot at all, someone like Epinesa.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, let's see here what James Dean has to say. Jumping in on Super Chat. Appreciate
Thank you, James.
We have a speedster. Deontay Spencer, need to give him the ball. It's one of those curious things. I don't know why the previous offensive coordinator didn't want to utilize him more than as just window dressing in fake, wide receiver screens and wide receiver jet sweeps and stuff. I mean, he touched the ball a couple of times on offense, but yeah, you wonder why he doesn't get thought of more by the team. But all we can tell you is the Broncos themselves are saying, we're gonna be targeting speed demons in this draft. And so it doesn't preclude Spencer from making this roster, Zach. But if he does make this roster again in 2020, it's going to be as a returner first and a wide receiver second. And, we'll do some digging on that to find out why. But I don't think they trust his hands, which is odd because he can catch a punt under duress, but you're worried about him run. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
I mean, as Brendan Langley proved, it takes more than just speed to play wide receiver in the NFL and in the Broncos system. Spencer has speed for sure, but he's better suited, like Chad said, on special teams as opposed to being on offense. Ideally, the Broncos would have a guy who can be the number 2 wide receiver, the speedster, and also the punt returner. So we'll have to see how that plays out this offseason. Spencer will be on the roster. He's not going to be the long-term wide receiver 2 the Broncos need.
We certainly don't want to neglect our live listeners on Periscope, on Twitter. So let's grab Trap Javier here. He says, is 10-6 a realistic record for the Broncos next season? Zach, I think it is. Like, it's easy to just go, 8-8. Let's see how they do. If they can improve by one game from 7-9 to 8-8, I think 10-6 is realistic. And 10-6, of course, would put you, 9 times out of 10 would put you in the playoffs, at least as a wild card.
Especially if the NFL's adopting that 7-team in the playoffs rule or whatever for next season, the Broncos have a better chance of making it. But how many times, I don't like to play the what if game, but how many games this season alone were the Broncos just one little step away from winning? If the ball would have bounced a certain way, the Broncos would have won that game. That's the difference between going 7-9 and 10-6. And now they have Drew Lock. We all saw how the Broncos finished the season last year with them. I would expect something like 9-7 to be the record next season. It's not the hope, it should be the expectation. And 10-6 right above that with Drew Lock. If he pans out, it could be even 11-5, 12-4, the year of Drew Lock. I mean, 10-6 is definitely, I think, in the Broncos range.
Chris DeLuca on Facebook says, what do you guys think the odds are we retain Chris Harris Jr., the percentage? Zach, Mike Kliss said it's 25%. He's as plugged in as anybody. You can call him a mouthpiece of the team. I think that's pretty fair assessment. 1 in 4 chance. Look at it like that.
Without even saying anything, I was going to say 30%. So I'm right there with him. It's not going to happen. He's pricing himself out of the Broncos range, and we have to just wish him well in his next journey.
And for what it's worth, he hasn't closed the door on the Broncos, but the Broncos just appear to be ready to let him go. I don't know if it was just simply he didn't jive with Fangio or just a combination of that with having a down year, with, being 31 by the time the regular season starts this year.
But it's not his fault, Chad.
Right. Point it to somebody else, a la Chris Harris. That's what he likes to do. Buona Beast says, any thought on the NFLPA and NFL agreeing to extend the time to use the franchise tag? I've not seen any outlet tell me why this happened. Is this because of good faith in the CBA negotiations? Honestly, I don't know about that one, Buona Beast. I don't want to steer you wrong. I haven't done any research on that myself. Have you, Zach?
I haven't followed the negotiations that closely, but I do believe it's some sort of compromise on both sides to give the sides a couple extra days to get the franchise and transition tag down, because it would be bad for business the other way around. It would screw a lot of teams like the Cowboys out of using both those tags. So I think it's the right move for these sides while negotiations are ongoing to throw each other a bone in a certain sense.
Dylan jumps in on Super Chat. Appreciate you, bro.
Thank you, Dylan.
$5 donation. That means the world. Evan also jumping in on Super Chat.
Evan.
I can't drop no $100.
That's all good.
No, of course. Yeah, we don't expect you to, bro. But if we do trade for Diggs, Stephon Diggs, who would be a good drafted wide receiver 3? Ruggs, Rager. So Ruggs at pick 15. Jalen Rager at 46. Denzel Mims at 77. Or Johnson at 83. You guys rock. I'm hearing that Ruggs there's a good chance he's going to run and test really well at the combine and ends up vaulting over CeeDee Lamb, ends up vaulting over Jerry Jeudy to be the number 1 viewed wideout by the league. And if that's the case, he's not going to be there at pick 15. But in theory, from the names you listed, I would go just exactly as you have it. I would go Ruggs, Rager, Mims, Johnson in that order. But Rager would make for a very interesting player as well as the number 3 guy. And so would Denzel Mims. Mims impressed me So he really has a lot during this pre-draft trail, and Eric Trickle's done a lot of work on him. And that's how I learn about the draft, is I'm copy editing the work of Eric, Nick Kendall, Carl Dummler. That's how I learn about these guys. And I get tuned on to them. Then I go watch some film, and then I do my own research. And all four of those guys are interesting, but I would go exactly as you have them listed. Although again, I'm not 100% in on going wide receiver in the first, just because of how deep the class is.
I also don't think Rager or Mims are going to be there at those spots either, Chad. They're going to test really well at the combine, and both can be late fringe first-round prospects, second round at worst. So in that order, I'd have to agree, but there's only one guy among that group that really truly fits what the Broncos need with Drew Lock, and that's Henry Ruggs. And I prefer, if no other things break their certain way on defense or offensive line, he is the pick at 15.
Brian jumps back in and says on Super Chat, he says, it would be funny if we got both Diggs, Stephon, and Trayvon. That would, my friend. Thanks again for the support.
Yes.
Christy, Super Chat superstar, jumps in, $20 donation.
Thank you, Christy.
We love you. We appreciate you. Do you think the Broncos trade DeMarcus Walker? Zach, what do you think?
I don't think so. I mean, they have him under relatively cheap control for this season. He can be a potential key contributor if they lose Derek Wolfe and Shelby Harris, or regardless if they lose one or the other. I think they're going to give him one more chance in a Vic Fangio defense and let him push the pocket. I'm still a fan of DeMarcus Walker. I still have hope for him in the system that he can contribute. Never going to be a 10-sack guy, Chad, but he can contribute 3, 5, 6 sacks a year. To me, that's good for this season.
Buona Beast, man, he is focused on this punter thing. What traits do you want out of our new punter? Hang time, accuracy, or power? If I got to pick one of the three, it's accuracy, because you got the thin air, right, and Mile High is going to help out a punter, 8 games out of the year. So for me, and even if you weren't in thin air, accuracy is the premium for any punter. Power, I mean, in a perfect world, you'd want all three, right? Hang time, ability, accuracy, or power. But for me, I'm prioritizing accuracy. And if I can, I'm trying to go Bill Belichick and find that lefty.
I mean, of the three qualities, I would take power the least. I want hang time to allow my team to get down the field and cover the kick, and I want accuracy for the reasons you mentioned, Chad. Those coffin corner punts to pin opponents deep. You always want that, not to leave a guy in the middle of the field. So they're going to probably draft a punter this sometime in the 5th or 6th round this year, and I hope he has one of those two qualities that we mentioned.
What's Up 12 on YouTube says, should we cut Todd Davis and sign a better linebacker in free agency? I'm really torn on the topic of cutting Todd Davis. Like, there's a part of me that says, is he really worth that $6 million he's going to make this year? And the team could save, $5 million on the cap if they cut him. It's an option on his deal. The team can get out of that pretty close to paying free. But at the same time, he's very undervalued and underappreciated as a run stuffer. And I think he proved last year, Zach, that, Vic Fangio's scheme can help him kind of camouflage some of his deficiencies in coverage, although it can eliminate them. And eventually it comes out in the wash. And that's where you get to, should the Broncos try and find an upgrade? Yes, absolutely. Try and find the upgrade. But I'm not sure you do that at the expense of cutting Todd Davis at this point. Because even that $5 million, I mean, again, $62 million in cap space as of today, right? You get rid of you pass on the option of Ron Leary, you free up another $8.5 million. Same for Joe Flacco, you cut him, it's another 10. So now we're talking $80 million. You don't really need Todd Davis's $5 million. So keep him on the roster, see how he looks, and then he's your fail-safe, he's your stopgap. If you strike out in free agency, or if you don't find the guy you're pining for, if you're not able to get him in the draft, you still have Todd Davis, and you can at least live with him and AJ playing together.
Yeah, there's value to Todd Davis in this defense. He's a really good run stuffer. He does that well. He's always among the Broncos' leading tacklers every year, but he's awful in coverage. And if the Broncos can mask that deficiency, they can get by with him. I would, if the Broncos don't cut him, I'm not going to shed any tears. If they keep him, I'm not going to shed any tears. But they, regardless, need an upgrade behind them. If not a new starter opposite A.J. Johnson, an upgrade, a 3-down linebacker who can play over Josie Jewell and provide some value in pass coverage. They're still going to have to face Travis Kelce and the Chiefs twice a year. A lot of good tight ends in the NFL. They need linebackers that can run with these guys, and I'm not going to depend on just A.J. Johnson to be that guy.
Corey Littleton makes a lot of sense for the Broncos because, he's a fair to middling run stuffing linebacker, but he's an excellent coverage linebacker. And that's what you need to kind of complement A.J. Johnson, who's great at filling gaps, getting down there and attacking the ball carrier, but kind of gets a little lumbering and slow when it comes to covering short areas. Zones, he, again, Fangio's scheme can cover the deficiencies and flaws and kind of camouflage some of that because it's so friendly to basically every position on the field is his defense. And utilizing zones, you're not running after someone one-on-one like in man coverage, but still, in a perfect world, you want a complement to A.J. Johnson, and Corey Littleton makes a lot of sense. I'm going to be interested to see whether or not the Broncos show any interest in Danny Trevathan and what his injury situation is coming off of last season in which he ended up on IR. Bill, 1293 on YouTube. Better chance at Byron Jones or Darius Slay? Zach, what do you think odds-wise has the better shot?
I don't know. I don't see John Elway parting with 2 sets of capital to pick up a cornerback when he can sign a guy who I think is better, and I think he would think is better for the system in Byron Jones. I just think there's a better chance of, if it's 15 versus 16 million, saving that draft pick and getting a better upgraded cornerback. And like you always say, Chad, set it and forget it. Just plug and play corner, day one starter, immediate contributor. That's what Byron Jones would be. So if I had my druthers, the better choice to me, the more realistic choice is Byron Jones.
Clayton on Facebook, we love you too, bro. Thanks for supporting the show.
Yes.
Been with us for about a year. Appreciate you, man. Every listener means the world to us, so we appreciate you guys. I mean, this show is growing by leaps and bounds on YouTube. And by the way, we crossed over the 5,000 subscribers mark last week. Shout out to each and every one of our new subscribers on YouTube. There's that group of fans that are watching live and listening to shows after the fact as well. We have about 11,000 listeners that listen on Apple Podcasts each and every episode. And then, of course, the Facebook audience, and then, of course, the Twitter Periscope audience. So this is a show that is growing in reach exponentially, and it's thanks to guys like you, Clayton, who have been with us as well for a long time and hanging with us and sharing it out there on social media, contributing to the conversation here. It means the world to us. Ron jumps in. Super chat. Ron, by the way, my friend, reach out to us, milehighhuddle@gmail.com. Give us your personal deets. You've been really consistent on Super Chat with us, and we'd like to send you a little thank you, maybe a hat, maybe a hoodie. So reach out to us so we can get your personal deets. Let us know your shirt/hoodie size, milehighhuddle@gmail. $5 donation, Ron says, do you think there is a real chance that Amari Cooper comes to Denver? Ron, we touched on this early in the show. Neither Zach or myself think that's feasible just because – if he wasn't going to command $20 million close to on the open market, yeah, I mean, if you could get him somewhere, I don't know what he would be worth in a perfect world to the Broncos, but I can tell you this, $20 million off the table for the Broncos.
To me, the only people that are worthy of being paid that much are franchise quarterbacks, Chad, $20 million and above. It may be just a middling starter can get that money, but a quarterback in the NFL, I would not pay Amari Cooper $20 a year, nor would I, for the Broncos, get him at any rate above $15 million. He's not what they need. He's not that pure speedster. If they can look in the draft, save some money, get a cheaper guy, a younger guy, a faster guy, that's the route they should go and stay far away from Amari Cooper, who I don't even think leaves Dallas. I think he'll be transition or transition tagged. Sorry.
Right. Transition or franchise tag could be in the cards.
Tongue twister.
If you're the Dallas Cowboys, man, I mean, franchise caliber, even starting caliber quarterbacks, man, they don't grow on trees. Ask John Elway. Jerry Jones, he's been in the desert. Think about what the Cowboys went through before they found Tony Romo all those years ago, the Drew Bledsoes and the Quincy, I forget his last name.
Carter.
Quincy Carter, exactly. Thank you. I mean, they suffered a long time post Troy Aikman trying to find that guy. Tony Romo gave them consistency and stability for many years, and they lucked into Dak in the third or fourth round, whatever it was they got him, and he's turned into a really good. I understand the arguments about him not being a lead, and he's not on the same levels of the Deshaun Watsons and Lamars and Mahomes. I get that, but he's at worst a starting caliber quarterback in this NFL, and they don't grow on trees. So I think you're going to see the Dallas Cowboys, and Zach, you told me this even before this we went live tonight.
Yeah.
They're probably going to find a way to make some peace and get him re-signed on a long-term deal, which then opens the door to tag Amari Cooper. And Ariel jumps in on Super Chat, $2 donation. Appreciate you,
Thank you, Ariel.
I wake up, I see Flacco on the roster. I die.
That's sad.
I die a little inside each and every time. I feel you, man. It's just so underwhelming, right? Joe Flacco. Listen.
Enough said.
All right. Eclipse Stormborn, longtime listener of the show, jumps in on Super Chat. Thanks, brother. In Philadelphia, says, Bowles, can Munchak take lemons and make chocolate cake and make you wonder how he did it? Also, how about Diggs for Hamilton and 2 third-rounders. Now, for me, that's too steep. Some fans are really stoked on the idea of Stephon Diggs. I like him. Eric Trickle swung me about halfway toward, being completely out on the notion to I'm at least open to it, but not for 2 third-rounders. Now, if you could get him for a third and Deshaun Hamilton, you got him locked up long-term, maybe. I don't know. But it's just not my favorite idea.
You're taking away a receiver to add a receiver, then you break even, but you're losing draft picks, you're losing salary cap space and the contract that he wants. I just don't understand the move for Stephon Diggs. I don't see the interest from the Broncos side. And in terms of Garrett Bowles, I think, Chad, I'm a little more pessimistic than you are about him. I think he can come around, but I just want to see it consistently over the course of a few games at the minimum.
I hope you guys saw that. I'm not going to read that one live because this is, not that Brian's funny comment there makes it not family friendly, but this is a family friendly show. But we all need that laugh now and again, right? Usually Mark Langley provides that for us. I don't know where Mark's at tonight, but Brian coming in, saving the day. Appreciate you, bro. Terry Randall jumps back in on Super Chat. He says, you guys in the chat never let me down. You never let us down, bro. So consistent. We love you. We got time for 1 or 2 more here, guys, and then we got to split. Manny Wise jumps in on Super Chat. Good to see you, Manny. Thank you for the donation.
Thank you, Manny.
That means a ton to us, my friend. Any chance the Broncos go after Joe? Is it Thuney? Is it Tooney? But Joe T from the New England Patriots. You know what? I like it as a possibility, but you have to wonder. This was something that was brought to my attention by Nick Kendall and Carl Dummler on Building the Broncos. How much his success, Joe Thuney, and it's under the radar success. It's not like he's out there, winning all the accolades in the world, but he is an above average, or he has been an above average starter. He's been a left guard, by the way. So what are you going to do if you do sign Thuney? Are you going to move Dalton Reisner, or are you going to play Thuney at right guard? What are you going to do there? But either way, you have to wonder how much of his success can be attributed to Tom Brady having just that Hall of Fame pocket awareness, Dante Scarnecchia, the offensive line coach, whom some believe is even better at his job than Mike Munchak. None of that is to take away from the fact that Joe Thuney is a very viable candidate. But I think the Broncos, I think it's possible, but I think, again, the Broncos are going to prioritize most of those cap dollars, re-signing the 1 or 2, 3 maybe of their own homegrown guys, and then bolstering that defense.
He's going to get starters money, so unless the Broncos are signing him to start at center or guard, he's not going to come to Denver. He's going to probably sign elsewhere, probably with the Dolphins, who can throw around some money. He'd be a good, great backup guy to have, a good swing guy to have, but he's going to get a starting job elsewhere. We just have to hope the Broncos can restock the cupboard through the draft and finally get some young developmental prospects for Munchak to work with.
Jake jumps in on Super Chat, $5 donation. Appreciate you, Jake. I think we should have boring draft and draft back-to-back linemen, protect our QB. Battles are won and in the trenches, which is true. I get that. I totally do. And I see why you would think that. But who's going to start? Because you got Garrett Bowles penciled in. He's a starter. That's not going to change. Juwan James penciled in, starter. That's not going to change. So there's 2. Left guard is Dalton Reisner. That's not going to change. You got 2 possibilities, a center and a guard. I'm not sure there's a first-round caliber center this year. I don't think there is. I mean, there's fringe guys like Cushenberry at LSU, Biadasz, the Wisconsin guy, probably a day 2 guy when it all is said and done. I understand what you're saying. It's not lost on us, Jake. Zach, the Broncos do need to make sure this offensive line is legit and can protect Drew Lock.
It's true, and I just think they're going to do that primarily through the draft this year. They can get starting caliber linemen. It doesn't have to be in the first round, but they can get those guys throughout, and they have enough capital this year to build up the line. But that's also why I'm saying, and to your point, you always talk about not taking a receiver in the first round. If you can avoid it, it's also equally important to not only give him that speedster, but to protect Drew Lock as well. And, if he ends up on his back constantly, it doesn't matter who's playing wide receiver. So they have to protect him and surround him with weapons. So I'm for sure on board with that through the draft.
Black Knight jumps in on YouTube. He says, what do you make of the Lions being open on trading their 3rd pick overall? And who do you think bites on that? Also, any thoughts on making an MHH tank top? I need something to rock while I work out. Well, hey, that's the first request we've had for a tank top. So we will put it in the queue as something to get up on the merch store, Black Knight, just for you, buddy. I don't know, timing wise, give us a week or so. We'll get something up for you. But the idea of the Lions, being willing to trade the number 3 overall pick, who do you think bites on that? I mean, just look at who the quarterback needy teams in this league are, Zach. That's who you look at moving up to number 3.
Right. That's exactly the point. I just, I don't see the Broncos making that move. I don't see them giving up that capital this year. So it's fun to speculate. It's fun to be bandied about, but I don't see it as a plausible thing.
Discount Audio and Wheels jumps in on Super Chat. Guys, this has to be our last one for tonight. Thank you for joining us as always. And of course, Discount Audio, thank you for your support. It means the world to us, man. It says, I really like the connection that Locke and Deshaun Hamilton had going the last few games. Do you believe he's a good fit in Pat Shurmur's new scheme as the third receiver, assuming we got another to be the second option? They did seem to have a little magic going, Deshaun and Drew Lock. They had a little something, and I'm going to be curious to see if and how that continues to evolve and develop. But there's a good chance the Broncos draft or sign Deshaun's replacement and render Deshaun a number 4 and number 5 guy on the depth chart. Could he be the third guy in Pat Shurmur's scheme? Yes, because he's such a prolific route runner. He can find the soft spot in the zone. You know, he had that one drop against the Oakland Raiders in the season opener in the end zone that just was just a face-palming lapse, right? But outside of that, I was really impressed, especially down the stretch. Deshaun Hamilton, Zach, he was tough, man. He would go over the middle, he would catch the ball, and he would take the shot, and I like that, and that builds up trust with his young quarterback as well.
I don't see the Broncos throwing in the towel on Deshaun Hamilton. I think they're going to give him one more season. Now the Broncos, they finally have stability. They finally have a young quarterback who will enhance the talent around him. As we saw, to your point, the tail end of last season, it will raise all ships around Drew Lock. So I think they're going to go with Deshaun Hamilton at worst the number 4 guy. They'll add a couple wide receivers in this coming draft, and we'll see who makes hay with the quarterback. He could be the guy. They have the chemistry down. Just have to build on it now.
All right, Brian jumped back in on Super Chat. We cannot ignore a Super Chat. Brian says, thank you, Brian. Appreciate you, bro.
Yes,
he says,
thank you.
Who do you guys think will be our biggest free agent pickup this offseason? Byron Jones or maybe someone else? I think Byron Jones is the leader in the clubhouse. Keep an eye on the defensive line situation, whether it ends up, we'll see what happens with Chris Jones if the Kansas City Chiefs end up tagging him or giving him a long-term deal. He's another guy. I could see the Broncos being willing to open up the checkbook to get him here because he's such a game wrecker and he affects the quarterback. And Von Miller, you just don't know. I mean, look, I can charge last year up to it being an outlier, but it's enough to create doubt that he might be on the downside of his career. And if that's the case, you need as many guys on that front 7 that can affect the quarterback as possible. You got Bradley Chubb coming back, but I would say Byron Jones as the biggest. If you're looking at those top of the line guys, Justin Simmons is going to be one of them, going to get max contract. Byron Jones could be another. And yeah, maybe Chris Jones. Who do you think, Zach? Anyone I'm missing here?
Far and away, Byron Jones is the top priority of the Broncos. He's the biggest free agent catch if they do sign him. I would say someone like maybe Joe Thuney. I'm just looking realistically at positions the Broncos would target, but they're going to leave that for the draft more than likely. So Byron Jones. I happen to believe, though, a lot of the Broncos' biggest names in free agency, at least the first wave, are going to be their own guys, Chad. The Justin Simmons, the Derek Wolfs, maybe, low chance Chris Harris Jr., but they're really going to lock down their guys before really extending to the open market beyond Byron Jones.
Jody, we're not advocating for Garrett Bowles. We're not saying Garrett Bowles is the man with the plan. We're not saying Garrett Bowles even deserves necessarily. I'm not saying it either. We're just telling you the way the wind's blowing. All right. There's nothing to suggest that Garrett Bowles will not be the starter. That was a double negative. That was bad grammar. Garrett Bowles is going to be the starter this year, barring some unforeseen blockbuster move like a trade for Trent Williams. But it's not going to happen. The Broncos believe he finally turned the corner under Mike Munchak. He was their first-round pick. John Elway loves him. He's your starting left tackle this year, barring injury and barring some unforeseen blockbuster, Zach. And with that, we got to get out of here.
I mean, I'm no Bowles fan, but at least he finally has a young gunslinging quarterback who has mobility, and he will bail Garrett Bowles out of a lot of ticky-tack situations this year. So I'm with you, Chad. I think the Broncos are banking on having a new coaching staff on the offensive side and having Drew Lock as a starter. That should help Bowles out, be consistent.
James, if you had two that I've missed, I assure you I will find them after the show. And they'll be the first things we talk about on tomorrow night's show. I try not to miss any of that. Sometimes the comment stream goes so fast, and on the streaming platform that we use, it cuts off after a while, depending on the number of comments in the stream. So if we missed them, I promise you I'll go back in after we log off here tonight, and I'll find them, and I'll earmark them we'll address them first things first on tomorrow's show. So if we missed, apologies for that, but that is not how that's not standard operating procedure. I promise you. What does he say here? Yeah. Well, dude, I can't go back. Unfortunately, I can't go back up the stream where I find him. I promise you. We don't like doing that. So we will make that top priority for tomorrow night's show. I promise you. You have our word. But guys, that's got to do it for today. Thank you as always for joining the Huddle Up Podcast live. Make sure you're following the show on Twitter at Huddle Up Pod. You can see here. It is simply the best way for you to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening with the show in real time. Don't forget to also find my partner, Zack Kelberman, here on Twitter, at Kelberman NFL, and myself, at Chad and Jensen. One other thing, guys, we like to tag our Super Chat superstars on Twitter after the fact. If you're following us on Twitter, or if you do end up following us on Twitter, make sure you let us know who you are so that we can associate your name on YouTube or Facebook or whatever with your Twitter account. Very important. But Zach, dude, we'll circle back tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Mountain, 8 p.m. Eastern. We'll see if anything shifts on the Combine Trail and what the Newswire has for us to analyze.
Yeah, all the media and the prospects are descending upon Indianapolis now. So as the week goes on, we should have more to talk about, but hopefully we have a little bit tidbit of news for tomorrow's podcast. Mark, dude. Wow. Just as we're logging off. At the buzzer, just swishes a 3 from downtown. Thank you, Mark. That's unbelievable. That really is. Smokes. I mean, we're glad you like the hoodie, but it literally is us speechless. We appreciate it beyond words. Thank you, Mark. Seriously. We have your deeds. Wow. You got some gear coming your way, my friend. Jack Conklin, OT to Denver. You know, he had that first 2 years he was in the league with Tennessee. I really liked him. I'm not sure he projects. I mean, maybe as a right guard. He's low-key possibility as a right guard. I think he's better served as an interior guy than a tackle, but we'll see. He is going to be a free agent, Zach. What do you think of Conklin? He's going to get a starting job as a tackle elsewhere. And the Broncos, they just paid Juwan James last offseason. They're still invested in Garrett Bowles. He would be a good prospect in a different situation, different circumstance, but yeah, he's not coming to Denver in free agency. All right, guys. Mark, we'll be in touch here very soon. Yes, thank you again. Stu, thank you. Everyone. Steven, all of your support. It means the world to us, you guys. We got to bounce out for tonight, though. Don't worry. We'll be back in the saddle. Same time as usual tomorrow night, Monday, 6 p.m. Mountain, 8 p.m. Eastern. Thanks again to everyone for joining us live. For Zack Kelberman, I'm Chad.
You've been listening to the Huddle Up Podcast. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.